Let me tell you something right now. Before doubt gets comfortable in your seat, before fear starts whispering excuses in your ear, where you are standing today is not the limit of your life. It's not the ceiling. It's not the end of the road. It's only the starting point of what happens when you decide to think higher, not wish higher, not talk higher, think higher, because the life you keep praying for, dreaming about, and waiting on is locked behind the level of your thinking. Most people don't fail because they're lazy. They fail because their vision is too small. They aim for what's convenient instead of what's possible. They ask for survival when they were built for significance. And the tragedy isn't that life is hard. The tragedy is settling for less when you were created for more. Thinking higher means you stop seeing yourself the way your past defined you. It means you stop letting where you came from decide where you're going. Some of you were raised in environments that taught you to play it safe, stay quiet, don't dream too loud, don't reach too far. But hear me clearly, your environment trained you, it did not create you. What created you placed something powerful inside you, and that power responds only when you elevate your thinking. You cannot live a high life with low expectations. You cannot build an extraordinary future with ordinary thoughts. Every breakthrough you admire started as a thought that refused to stay small. Every success story you respect began when someone dared to believe beyond logic, beyond statistics, beyond their current circumstances. They didn't have more resources. They had more vision. Let me tell you the truth nobody likes to hear. Life does not respond to need. It responds to belief. You can need it badly and still miss it. You can want it desperately and still never touch it. But when you believe at a higher level, when your mind expands beyond fear, something shifts. Opportunities start recognizing you. Ideas start finding you. Doors begin opening that you didn't even knock on. Thinking higher also means understanding that setbacks are not signs to stop. They are signals to grow. Every delay is developing you. Every disappointment is strengthening you. You're not being denied, you're being prepared. But preparation requires patience, and patience requires faith, and faith only survives when your thinking rises above what you see. Some of you are frustrated because you're doing the right things, but you're not seeing immediate results. You're planting seeds and checking the ground every day, wondering why nothing has changed. But growth happens underground before it ever shows above the surface. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not working. Higher thinking understands timing. Lower thinking quits too soon. Thinking higher means you stop asking, what if it doesn't work? And start asking, what if it does? What if this idea changes your family's future? What if this decision breaks a generational cycle? What if this risk introduces you to the life you've been praying for? Fear always asks the wrong questions. Faith asks better ones, and let me be clear. Thinking higher will cost you something. It may cost you comfort. It may cost you people who only knew the old version of you. It may cost you late nights, early mornings, and silent seasons where nobody claps for you. But what it gives you is worth everything. It gives you growth. It gives you purpose. It gives you a life that reflects your potential instead of your excuses. You don't need permission to think higher. You don't need validation. You don't need approval from people who are afraid to dream themselves. All you need is the courage to believe that your life can be more than it is right now, and the discipline to act like it. So here's my challenge to you. Stop shrinking your dreams to match your reality, and start expanding your reality to match your dreams. Raise your expectations, upgrade your mindset, speak differently about yourself, move like you believe something greater is possible, because it is. When you leave here today, don't just feel motivated, move motivated. Make one bold decision, take one uncomfortable step, write down one vision that scares you a little, commit to thinking higher every single day, even when it's hard, even when it's lonely, even when progress is slow. Because the moment you change how you think, you change what you attract. And when you decide to think higher, you give your life permission to rise. Most people never realize that the true limit on their lives is not money, education, talent, or opportunity. It is the ceiling created by their own thinking. Long before circumstances respond, the mind has already decided what is possible and what is not. When a person believes their life can only go so far, everything they do unconsciously works to confirm that belief. They apply for smaller opportunities, accept lesser treatment, tolerate environments that drain them, and dismiss ideas that feel too big. A low ceiling of thinking quietly shapes daily decisions, and over time, those decisions turn into a life that never reaches its full potential. Thinking sets the standard for what you expect, and what you expect becomes what you accept. If you expect struggle, you prepare for struggle. If you expect limitation, you adjust your goals to fit inside it. Many people live in survival mode not because they lack ability, but because their thinking never expanded beyond making it through the day. They aim for comfort instead of growth, security instead of significance, and familiarity instead of progress. The mind becomes conditioned to play small, and eventually, even big opportunities feel uncomfortable or undeserved. Every level in life demands a matching level of thought. You cannot think like someone barely getting by and expect to live like someone who is thriving. Higher levels require higher standards. How you talk, how you plan, how you prepare, and how you see yourself. When thinking remains low, discipline feels unnecessary, excellence feels optional, and mediocrity becomes acceptable. But when thinking rises, everything else is forced to rise with it. Habits improve. Choices become intentional. Time is treated as valuable instead of wasted. The most dangerous part of limited thinking is that it feels normal. It disguises itself as realism. People say they are just being practical, just being cautious, just being honest about their situation. But realism without vision is a slow form of self-denial. The truth is, most breakthroughs came from people who refused to think within the limits of what made sense at the time. They thought beyond their bank accounts, beyond their resumes, beyond public opinion. They allowed their vision to outgrow their circumstances, and eventually their circumstances had no choice but to catch up. Thinking higher does not mean ignoring reality. It means refusing to let reality have the final word. It means understanding that where you are is temporary, but where you are going is intentional. A person who thinks higher begins to see challenges differently. Problems become puzzles instead of walls. Failure becomes feedback instead of a verdict. Criticism becomes noise instead of direction. When the ceiling of thinking lifts, resilience strengthens because the mind is no longer shocked by difficulty. It expects resistance on the way to growth. When thinking expands, self-worth expands with it. People stop negotiating their value. They stop settling for less than they deserve because they no longer see themselves as small. They begin to prepare for opportunities before they arrive because higher thinking anticipates success instead of reacting to failure. The mind starts operating from abundance instead of lack, from purpose instead of fear, from confidence instead of doubt. What once felt impossible begins to feel reachable, then achievable, then inevitable. The ceiling of your life will always match the ceiling of your thinking. Raise one, and the other must follow. One of the greatest obstacles people face is the belief that their past or their environment has the final say over their future. Many grow up hearing limitations spoken over them, about where they come from, what people like them usually achieve, or how far someone from their background can realistically go. Over time, those messages settle into the mind and begin to feel like facts instead of opinions. Thinking higher requires rejecting the idea that your origin determines your destination. Where you started may have shaped your awareness, but it does not define your capacity. Environment can influence behavior, but it does not create destiny. Being surrounded by lack does not mean you were designed for lack. Being raised around struggle does not mean struggle is your permanent assignment. Too many people confuse familiarity with truth. They assume that because everyone around them lives a certain way, that way must be the limit. Higher thinking breaks that mental agreement. It recognizes that exposure is not identity, and that circumstances are conditions, not conclusions. The past has power only when it is given permission. Mistakes, failures, and missed opportunities often become mental prisons, convincing people they are disqualified from growth. They replay old errors and use them as evidence that they cannot succeed, love deeply, or aim high. But the past is a teacher, not a judge. Its role is to inform, not to condemn. When thinking rises, the mind stops asking, "What did I do wrong?" and starts asking, "What did I learn that makes me stronger now?" Many people stay stuck because they let old versions of themselves speak into present decisions. They listen to who they were instead of who they are becoming. Higher thinking understands that growth requires redefining self-image. You are not the same person you were in survival mode. You are not limited to the mindset you had when resources were scarce or confidence was low. As awareness grows, thinking must grow with it, or the mind will try to pull you back into old patterns simply because they feel familiar. Letting go of environmental limitations also means being willing to outgrow certain spaces and conversations. Some people are comfortable with your past because it makes them feel safe about their own choices. When you start thinking higher, resistance often comes not from enemies, but from those closest to you. They remind you of who you used to be, what you used to believe, and what you once said you could never do. Higher thinking does not argue with that resistance, it outgrows it. The moment you stop identifying with where you came from, you free yourself to design where you are going. Your background may explain some of your struggles, but it does not excuse staying small. Growth demands a new internal narrative, one that speaks possibility instead of limitation, purpose instead of pain. When the mind releases the grip of the past, it gains the freedom to imagine a future that looks nothing like what came before. You were not created to repeat history. You were created to redefine it. Many people live under the assumption that wanting something badly is enough to make it happen. They believe that desire alone carries power, that simply hoping, wishing, or needing a break through will somehow force life to respond. But life does not move based on desperation. It moves based on belief. There is a difference between wanting change and believing change is possible. Wanting speaks from lack, while belief speaks from expectation. When belief is absent, effort becomes inconsistent, patience disappears, and obstacles feel like confirmation that success was never meant to happen. Belief shapes behavior long before results appear. A person who truly believes something is possible prepares differently. They think differently about time, about discipline, about sacrifice. They show up with intention even when no one is watching, because belief does not depend on applause or immediate outcomes. When belief is low, motivation becomes emotional and unreliable. People start strong but fade quickly, not because the goal is wrong, but because their belief was never deep enough to survive resistance. Needing something can make people emotional, but belief makes people committed. Need begs for relief. Belief expects results. That expectation quietly influences choices. What risks someone is willing to take, how much rejection they can tolerate, how long they are willing to stay consistent without visible reward. When belief is missing, every delay feels personal, every setback feels final, and every closed door feels like proof that the dream was unrealistic from the start. Belief also determines how a person interprets struggle. Without belief, hardship feels like punishment. With belief, hardship feels like preparation. Two people can face the same challenge and walk away with completely different conclusions. One decides it is a sign to quit, while the other sees it as evidence that growth is happening. The difference is not talent or opportunity. It is belief. Life mirrors back what the mind consistently expects. Many people sabotage their own progress because their belief never catches up to their desire. They ask for bigger opportunities but doubt their ability to handle them. They pray for growth but fear responsibility. They say they want more, yet their thinking is still anchored in survival. Belief requires alignment. It demands that thoughts, words, and actions move in the same direction. When belief rises, excuses begin to lose their power, and consistency becomes more natural than resistance. True belief is not loud or dramatic, it is steady. It shows up on days when motivation is gone. It continues working when results are slow. It remains disciplined when comfort is tempting. Belief does not eliminate fear, but it refuses to let fear make decisions. It acknowledges uncertainty without allowing uncertainty to dictate effort. When belief is present, people stop waiting for perfect conditions and start moving with what they have. Life responds to belief because belief produces action, endurance, and resilience. It shapes how long someone stays in the process and how much growth they allow themselves to experience. When belief deepens, patience strengthens, focus sharpens, and perseverance becomes part of identity rather than something that has to be forced. Many people interpret delays and setbacks as signs that something is wrong, that they have missed their moment or taken the wrong path. When progress slows or obstacles appear, discouragement quickly sets in, and doubt begins to speak louder than purpose. But delays are not denials, and setbacks are not verdicts. They are part of a process designed to develop strength, clarity, and endurance. Growth rarely happens in a straight line, and higher thinking understands that resistance is often evidence that something meaningful is being formed. Preparation often looks like frustration before it looks like success. There are seasons where effort feels unnoticed and results seem invisible, yet those seasons are shaping discipline, patience, and focus. Just as roots grow underground before a tree ever breaks the surface, progress often occurs where no one can see it. People who quit early usually quit because they expected reward before development. Those who think higher recognize that becoming ready is just as important as arriving. Setbacks reveal what still needs to be strengthened. They expose gaps in character, skill, or mindset that success would magnify if left unaddressed. Without resistance, weaknesses remain hidden. Difficulty forces growth in ways comfort never could. When thinking stays low, setbacks feel humiliating and personal. When thinking rises, setbacks become informative. They point out areas that require refinement, not reasons to abandon the journey. Delays also test commitment. They separate those who are interested from those who are invested. Anyone can stay motivated when progress is fast and feedback is positive, but true dedication is revealed in silence, in repetition, and in waiting. The ability to remain consistent without external validation is built only through time and tension. Higher thinking accepts that timing is not about convenience. It is about readiness. Many people ask why things are taking so long, not realizing that rushing the process would produce results they are not prepared to sustain. Early success without maturity often leads to burnout, loss, or collapse. Delays provide space to develop wisdom, humility, and resilience. They slow you down long enough to strengthen what would otherwise break under pressure. When thinking is elevated, patience becomes strategic rather than passive. Setbacks also refine vision. They force reflection, adjustment, and clarity. Sometimes a closed door is not rejection, but redirection. It prevents you from stepping into situations that would limit growth or distract from purpose. Higher thinking does not see obstacles as enemies. It sees them as filters that guide you toward better alignment. Each challenge removes illusions and sharpens focus. Those who succeed long-term are not the ones who avoided setbacks, but the ones who learned how to move through them without losing belief. They allowed difficulty to build endurance rather than bitterness. They stayed teachable instead of defensive. They understood that every pause had a purpose and every struggle carried instruction. Progress may slow, but development continues, shaping strength that cannot be rushed. Fear has a way of shrinking vision before anything ever goes wrong. It speaks in hypotheticals, exaggerates consequences, and convinces the mind to prepare for failure instead of possibility. It asks questions designed to paralyze action. What if it doesn't work? What if you fail publicly? What if you lose what little you have? When fear dominates thinking, the future becomes something to avoid rather than something to build. Vision narrows, goals become safer, and potential slowly gets traded for comfort. Faith, on the other hand, expands what the mind is willing to imagine. It does not deny risk, but it refuses to let risk define the decision. Faith asks better questions. What if this works? What if growth happens? What if this step changes everything? Where fear focuses on loss, faith focuses on opportunity. Where fear fixates on control, faith leans into trust. This shift in thinking changes how people move, how boldly they act, and how resilient they become when uncertainty appears. Fear often disguises itself as logic. It claims to be protecting you, keeping you realistic, stopping you from disappointment. But most limitations labeled as being practical are rooted in the discomfort of growth. Fear prefers familiarity even when familiarity is painful. It would rather keep you in known struggle than risk unknown success. Vision cannot grow in an environment dominated by fear because fear is committed to preservation, not expansion. Faith expands possibility by changing how failure is viewed. Instead of seeing failure as a final judgment, faith sees it as feedback. It removes the emotional weight from mistakes and allows learning to take place without shame. When faith leads, setbacks lose their power to define identity. A misstep becomes part of the journey, not a reason to stop walking. This perspective gives people the courage to try again, refine their approach, and stay engaged with their goals. When fear leads, action becomes hesitant and inconsistent. People wait for certainty that never comes. They delay decisions, overanalyze opportunities, and miss moments that require boldness. Faith understands that clarity often follows movement, not the other way around. Growth requires stepping forward before everything makes sense. Faith-driven thinking accepts uncertainty as part of progress and moves anyway. Faith also expands endurance. It gives people the strength to continue when results are slow and recognition is absent. Fear grows impatient and frustrated when progress is delayed, interpreting time as evidence that effort is wasted. Faith interprets time as investment. It trusts that consistency will produce results even when evidence is not yet visible. This belief fuels perseverance that fear cannot sustain. Vision thrives where faith is present. It allows imagination to stretch beyond current conditions and challenges the mind to see potential instead of problem. When fear loses its influence, goals become bolder, effort becomes stronger, and resilience deepens. Faith does not eliminate obstacles, but it changes how they are faced, replacing hesitation with courage and doubt with forward movement. Thinking higher is not a passive mindset. It demands action, discipline, and sacrifice. Many people enjoy the idea of growth, but few are willing to pay the price required to sustain it. Elevated thinking forces a person to confront habits that no longer serve their future and make changes that feel uncomfortable in the present. Comfort becomes the enemy of progress because growth always requires leaving something familiar behind. Action is the proof of higher thinking. Without movement, even the strongest mindset remains theory. People who think higher do not wait for perfect conditions or external validation before taking steps forward. They understand that clarity often comes after commitment. Action builds momentum, and momentum builds confidence. Waiting for motivation keeps people stuck, but discipline creates forward motion even on difficult days. Sacrifice is unavoidable when thinking expands. Time must be invested differently. Energy must be protected. Priorities must be rearranged. Saying yes to growth often means saying no to distractions, excuses, and environments that drain focus. This is where many people hesitate because sacrifice reveals what truly matters. It exposes whether comfort is more valuable than purpose. Higher thinking accepts short-term discomfort in exchange for long-term fulfillment. Discipline separates intention from outcome. It is easy to feel inspired in moments of clarity, but discipline sustains effort when emotions fade. Higher thinkers build routines that support their vision instead of relying on bursts of motivation. They show up consistently, even when progress is slow and recognition is absent. Discipline turns belief into behavior and goals into habits. Thinking higher also requires courage. Courage to stand alone when others do not understand the path. Courage to be misunderstood, criticized, or doubted. Growth often isolates before it elevates. When someone begins to think differently, they may outgrow conversations, spaces, and relationships that once felt comfortable. This separation is not arrogance, it is alignment. Higher thinking recognizes that not everyone can travel every stage of the journey. Action fueled by higher thinking is intentional. It is guided by purpose rather than impulse. Instead of reacting to circumstances, higher thinkers respond with strategy. They evaluate decisions through the lens of where they are going, not where they are standing. This level of awareness prevents wasted effort and scattered focus. Every step, no matter how small, moves in the direction of the larger vision. Sacrifice also includes patience. Results rarely appear immediately, and progress often feels slower than expected. Higher thinkers resist the urge to quit when outcomes are delayed. They understand that consistency compounds over time. Small actions repeated daily eventually produce massive change. This patience is not passive waiting but active persistence. When thinking rises, responsibility increases. There are fewer excuses and more accountability. Higher thinkers own their choices, their effort, and their growth. They stop blaming circumstances and start managing their response. Action, discipline, and sacrifice become part of identity rather than obligations. Growth stops being something they hope for and becomes something they live for every day.